October meeting, monthly meeting for the Fairfield Board of Finance. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm going to ask our Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Mayor, to lead us in the pledge this evening.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would everybody please remain standing for a minute? As you're all aware, we had an act of, and I don't know what else to call it other than domestic terrorism in Las Vegas. And I'd like to hold a moment of silence, and our thoughts are with the victims and their families, and equally with the first responders and the heroic citizens who came to their rescue and help. If you saw what happened, the carnage was brutal, and the fact that citizens ran towards that and helped out their fellow citizens really says a lot about this country. And regardless of what might divide us, those are certain things that bring us together. And we should be thankful for that and give thoughts and prayers for the victims and their families. Thank you very much. All right, bad segue, but on a much lighter note, we have some guests here from Mr. Flynn's civics class at Ward High School. And they've asked us to do something silly that I hope does not end up on YouTube, but we're going to try to accommodate them for their civics teacher. So come on up. Okay, and you're going to lead us in this. First of all, can we have your names?
All right.
Yeah, you can have a seat. They're not coming. No.
Start recording.
All right.
Alrighty. So my name is Eric Almanza.
I'm Molly Scatanato.
I'm a senior at Ward.
I'm a junior at Ward.
So we're just gonna say, hey.
Do we all have to do this?
Yes.
I would, yes.
All right.
For all the points.
On the, this is for extra credit, we're told, Mr. Flynn.
Yeah.
All right. No
All right.
relation, by the way. 1, 2, 3.
Hey.
All right.
That's what they're teaching you in history class these days? That's the extent of it? What's up with that?
I don't know why that's for extra credit. I don't know what that was all about. I'm sure I'll hear from Mr. Flynn. But thank you for being here, and I hope you stay longer than, hey. All right. Our agenda this evening. We've got several long items. One item that's off is number 4, because apparently that did not pass the Board of Selectmen yesterday. It was tabled. I'm not going to read it all right now, but we have a motion, resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen for $81,000 for a 3-year period for engine maintenance costs on some boats. We have the 10-year plan for the South Benson Marina. Thank you to the marina folks that are here tonight. We have an act upon a resolution recommended by the Board of Selectmen on a federally funded 100% reimbursable disaster recovery community development block grant not to exceed $300,000. That's down by Pine Creek dike elevation. We have the number 4 is gone. We have number 5, which is a resolution recommended by the Board of Selectmen and a bond appropriation for $250,000 related to the clubhouse at Smith Richardson. We have a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer. This is a holdover item with some additional information, recommended transfers for 2017. We have the minutes, and then any other communications. Does anybody else have anything else, questions, comments, concerns from board members? Seeing none, we'll take up item number 1. Welcome, Mr. Walsh. All right, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution is recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to expend a total of $81,258 over a 3-year period on engine maintenance costs on the 33-foot Safe Boat Defender and 23-foot Safe Boat, and replacement of 3 engines on the 33-foot Safe Boat Defender, $60,994 of said cost to be funded by a grant available under the Federal Department of Homeland Security Port Security Grant Program, and a 25% match from the town of Fairfield in the amount of $20,314. Now therefore be it resolved that Michael C. Tetro, First Selectman, be and thereby is authorized to accept in the name of and on behalf of the town of Fairfield, the Federal Department of Homeland Security Port Security Grant in the amount of $60,994, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to sign and execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant, and further resolved that $81,258 is hereby appropriated to fund said maintenance and purchases. That item is before us. Can I have a motion to put it before us? Mrs. Leclerc, a second by Mr. DeWitt, and we need new writers. Wow, those are terrible. All right, and who's up? It is Chief McNamara. Welcome. And Chief Liddy. Welcome, gentlemen.
I think it would be appropriate if we just start by saying, hey. I don't know, that's the trend for this evening.
You just hoping we don't go, nay.
That's right, seeing as you're all in a jovial mood.
All right.
Just to give you an overview of our Marine unit, we've had a footprint on the water in the town of Fairfield for over 50 years. And that has generally been with two vessels, one a larger vessel and then one a smaller vessel for depending upon the needs of the Marine unit and different bodies of water or the areas on the sound that we have to get to. In 2009, we were fortunate enough to get a grant from Homeland Security to purchase our large boat, to replace the large boat we had and replace it with a brand new boat, again with a port security grant, and that was in the amount of $488,000. That was not with a match. That was just a vessel that we obtained from Homeland Security. That's in 2009. In 2015, so more recent, we were able to, through a grant, replace our smaller boat. And if you recall, the smaller boat was sold to get this boat. And in addition to that, that was a matching grant, so we had to come up with, I believe it was roughly $14,000 that we needed to come up with within our budget. So we made the adjustment in our operating costs, because it wasn't planned for it, to accept the grant and make some decisions in the operating cost, given that we were going to be able to replace our boat, and we replaced our boat, our smaller boat. Our boats require maintenance like any vehicle does, so we have yearly maintenance costs on our boats and any of the equipment that we have. We recently applied for this grant, and this grant does two things for us. One, it provides us with ongoing maintenance costs, so it will kind of roll into the costs that we already have. It increases our maintenance costs. So generally, we're in the $5,500 to $6,000, $6,200 range every year just to maintain the boats. So that's an annual cost that we have in our operating budget. This grant pays for that and also increases the maintenance. So we're up to, I think, about $10,000 in maintenance. In addition to that, the grant will provide us with 3 new engines, or the ability to get 3 new engines to replace the engines on our larger boat that we received in 2009. Now, the engines are only as old as 2009, so we're only talking about 8 years old. But this grant is a 3-year grant. So what we anticipate doing is utilizing this grant, purchasing the engines, and since we have a little extra maintenance money through the grant, we'll be able to maintain what we have and work it out as long as possible before we put the new engines in. So the life cycle of an engine, obviously you'd hope to get, I don't know, 12, 13 years out of them, but it's an opportunity for us to come forward, purchase the engines during this 3-year period, and then have them to replace them in the three-year period after that. So we're getting a full life cycle out of the engines, but at the same time we're utilizing the grant to do that. In addition to that, the $20,000 or so that is a town match, that's spread out over 3 years. So we'll be able to use the money. So there'll actually be a savings within our operating costs of the $6,000 or so that we would normally spend each year. So that would be a savings in our maintenance.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Liddy, anything to add?
No.
Mrs. Marmion?
So just to clarify, the engines have not failed. You're buying 3 engines in anticipation of the life cycle of the engines coming to a natural end, correct?
Correct.
So would there be an opportunity, I'm just wondering, next year or the year after that, at the end of the life cycle of the engines to apply for this grant, or do we need to seize this opportunity now? I'm just confused on, should we be looking for the grant when we actually need it for the engines, or are you anticipating that that grant won't be there?
I think they're very highly competitive. So Homeland Security grants or any of the public safety grants that we apply for are highly competitive, and it's never a guarantee that we're going to get it. So Officer Wiltsey, who is on our Marine unit, is always in search of opportunities to get grants. That's how we got both of these other boats, actually through his work. So this grant, I don't believe, is available next year or the year after, and there's no guarantee that it will ever be available, given the financial restrictions. So it's kind of like the bird in hand type of thing. We applied, we got it, and now we just have to work with what opportunity we have.
Mrs. Esma?
Hi, Chief. These are new or refurbished?
Oh, brand new.
They're brand new, okay. And so what is the life cycle of this particular model engine usually? In use, obviously.
Yeah, I think we were discussing it, and I think we would hope to get 10 years out of them. Now, keep in mind that it's a public safety emergency boat, so life cycle is, you wouldn't work these engines until they fail. So,
Right.
We're probably figuring that 10 to 12 year mark, but you certainly don't want to go too long with those engines after that 10-year mark without a plan in place to replace them.
Right, okay, thanks.
Mrs. Leclerc?
Could I just make sure I understood properly? So we have a 25% match of 20,000 or so. And so can we pay that match over the 3 years? We don't have to pay it up front? So it's
Correct.
actually going to save money in our budget every year. So we're going to get 10,000 every year worth of maintenance instead of paying 6,000?
Correct.
Look at it, we're going to be paying $6,000 for $10,000 worth of maintenance.
And then with the engines, can we wait till the 3rd year to purchase them so they're not just sitting there? Or, yes?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, oh, good, thanks.
So I just have a follow-up question on that. So in the budget that you present to us this spring, et cetera, are you going to remove those maintenance costs from the budget that would have been in there ordinarily?
Yeah, I mean, it would be anticipated that we'd have that in savings of about $6,000 per year. So you'll see a $6,000 reduction in that line, that request, because we're getting funded for it.
Wait a minute, though. It's not it's a $6,000 adjustment in one line, but it's about $6,400 addition in another line to pay for the $20,000, correct?
Traditionally, a separate account is created
Right.
when we do a transfer.
Right. So the real pickup here is not in actual dollars out the door. The real pickup is getting that $10,000 worth of maintenance for what'll be a $6,400 a year for 3-year expenditure, correct?
Correct, plus the engines.
Right. So what they're giving us is $10,000 in maintenance for 3 years plus 3 new engines. The 3 new engines to be purchased in the 3rd year to sit on a shelf until such time as they need to be put in the boats.
Correct, and given the fact that we have an increase in the maintenance money that's available from $6,000 to $10,000, we anticipate we'll be able to maintain the engines that we have a little longer than the 3-year period of the grant.
Just curious, because I'm a federal taxpayer as well as a local taxpayer, will those engines sit and keep and be usable after that period of time sitting on a shelf?
My answer will be yes. We don't work in a vacuum, so we have a great relationship with our Marine Unit number 1 and our the maintenance of the boats to begin with. So we certainly wouldn't purchase something that wasn't going to be functioning and to put them in the boat. So if it was a choice between getting the engines and having them sit there so that they're not functional or putting them on the boat, we're certainly going to put them on the boat.
Questions from other board members on this item? Anybody? All right. Seeing none, I'm not going to read this again. Does anybody have any questions on the how this is written in our package. Do we have any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board, and I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of item number 1 on our agenda? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here this evening. All right, item number 2 on our agenda is to hear and discuss goals for the 10-year plan for the South Benson Marina. You might all recall that this comes out of our budget discussions, as well as what we've decided we need to be proactive to make sure we understand what's going on in certain operations around the town relative to revenue and expense. Much like the golf courses a number of years ago did a 10-year plan that resulted in about $100,000 to $120,000 worth of investment a year, as well as an award to the golf course a couple of years ago for all their improvements. We're hoping that we have a similar good plan from the South Benson Marina. And gentlemen, I want to thank you. You were on the agenda for a meeting ago, but that was a relatively lengthy agenda, and we asked your indulgence to hold over till this evening. So I appreciate you accommodating our schedule and being here tonight. So why don't you introduce yourselves, and we'll go from there.
Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm not going to speak much unless you guys have questions for me, but I'm going to turn it over to our Parks and Rec Chairman, Scott Walker, and our Marina Manager, Andy Kenny.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so we were assigned the task of putting together a 10-year plan for South Benson Marina, and that was the extent of it. So we're coming back to you for some more direction. It's pretty open instructions with regard to a 10-year plan. Do you want us to be, do you want us to privatize the marina? Do you want us to have the increase our rates to a certain percentage? Do you want us to remain an affordable marina? Do you want to see a redesign of the boat basin? So when we're putting together a plan, we'd like a little bit of feedback as to what you're expecting from us.
Does anyone want to opine on this to start out of the gate? I'll start. Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt.
Good evening, gentlemen. As I was speaking to the nice lady before the meeting started, the conversation for last 3-4 budget cycles has always been, are we charging competitive rates? Are we the best deal in town? Whatever. So I'll start by saying one of the things that I thought would come out of the 10-year plan was a recommendation to align our fees with some data attached, right? Maybe we don't want to be the most expensive, but what's the value proposition, I guess, of putting your boat into the South Benson Marina versus putting it elsewhere? And I don't know if we need to, I don't have a particular target for revenue. I mean, we could probably come up with a number if you really wanted to, but I think that the big thing was, is it a competitive rate, or, are we giving away the farm?
I would say it's I'd say it's a very affordable marina, given our neighbors. I'm not sure if you can hear me fine, but it's a pretty good deal.
Okay, so to follow on to that, is there an opportunity to, everybody likes a good deal, I get it, but is there an opportunity for us to make it a little more lucrative for the town without making it a bad deal?
Yes.
And you'd like us to set a goal?
No, I just didn't know, again, it was a 10-year plan, and we weren't sure what what your goals would be for us. Same question that we would ask for the Board of Selectmen. Yeah. It was a pretty open question, open instructions, and we would just like some direction. And if you said, okay, keep us, we would like a 10-year plan that delivers the same level of services that we're delivering now, maybe raise the rates a little, or we could certainly do that. But if you said, no, we want to make it a premier marina, we wanted you to incorporate a restaurant down there, you wanted us to do increase the basin, we had no idea what you were expecting. So we didn't want to just take our 5 minds and put it together and come up with some plan that you would never approve. So the idea was a little bit of direction from your Board of Selectmen, and then we at least have our marching orders.
Okay. Is anybody other, Mr. Matola?
From my perspective, I agree with Mr. DeWitt. I wanted to make sure that we were charging competitive rates that were comparable to other municipal marinas,
Or private marinas.
or
for
even
that matter.
private ones, that we're not giving away the farm, that type of thing. That's kind of how I looked at it. I mean, the golf course, for example, it essentially pays for itself.
Yes.
Does the marina pay for itself?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to, we can go back. I think there's two different price points there. You said if you'd like to be competitive with, or at least in line with other municipal marinas, we can certainly do that. We're probably on the lower side of our rates compared to our neighbors, but to compare it to a commercial marina it's not even the same ballpark. To give you an idea, similar size slip at Captain's Cove, it'd be nearly a 200% increase in our rates. But
How much?
184% for the largest slip at Captain's Cove. They charge $37.80 annually, and we're charging about $1,300. So now that's us compared to Captain's Cove. But if you want to compare us to, say, Westport, we're charging $1,300. Westport's charging $1,900 for a comparably sized boat. So there is room to move up in our rates. I think we're definitely not the cheapest, but we're not the most expensive either. Actually, we're one of the cheapest, really.
Mr. Walsh, did you have something? No, good
In
evening.
regards to Captain's Cove, is that private or public, municipal? What is
No,
it?
it's private.
It's private. So why would Captain's Cove be on here if other private marinas are not on here? Why did we choose Captain's Cove?
Next harbor over.
Excuse me?
It's the next harbor over. It's the closest neighbor.
But it's private, and just as you just said, it'd be unfair to compare us against other private marinas
Yes.
that are, have a lot more amenities, that are not even close to our rates. I don't think it's a really fair comparison to put that down here, especially with all the amenities that they offer. I mean, I'm not sure what their split out is. I don't know how much of their rates go to that building, the docks that surround it, the boardwalks that surround it. I just don't know what they are. It just doesn't seem like a fair comparison because it's got that is much different than what we have.
Absolutely, but I think it's a point of reference. I think the question came up, where would we be in relation to a private marina? It's the next harbor over. I think it makes sense to at least look at that number to give you an idea where a municipal marina would be versus where a private marina would be.
Are there any private marinas in Westport?
There are some small ones up the Saugatuck River, like All Seasons, very small.
Why don't we look at those? Because that's the next town over, too.
That's, that would be anecdotal. Those marinas are, really don't specialize in slips per se, just service. So very, very few slips, almost none to speak of.
It's hard to look at Captain's Cove. To me, it's so different. I don't care whether it's the next harbor over.
Okay.
I mean,
Gotcha.
It's just hard to compare. It's not apples to apples to me.
Right, I think
It's
it
not.
just shows the private market rate.
Okay.
Right, that's
All
kind
right, to look at it to that extent.
Sure.
Okay, have you compared that market rate to other privates? Is that like a comparable rate for other private marinas?
We did look at that.
Okay.
Well, you,
And then, did you look at what I know you have something in here with the line of inflation and things like that, but did you do what the inflationary rate was on the rates over, say, the last 10 years or the last 20 years?
that is the rate that if we were adjusting for inflation, that's what our rate would be. Our weighted average rate, that red line would be where our rates would be. The blue line is what our rates are, or what our rate history was.
Okay, but we don't know what the cumulative amount has been for the last 10 years.
As a total dollar amount?
Yeah. Oh, no, percentage-wise,
Well, we have it year over year.
year over year, but do you have anything that shows what it was for the last 10 years?
I mean, yes, I do. If you want me to read our rate increases, that's what you're asking as a percentage?
Not percentage by year. Do you know what it was, say, from, say, today's 2017, what the difference is between 2007 and 2017, the total?
No, I can get that for you.
Okay. Right. And then, I thought I'd see some type of profit and loss statement, what we're currently doing and where we're planning on spending our money currently, not what, whether you're asking this board that should we make a better marina, should we make a worse marina, because to be quite honest with you, that's not the purview of this board. That's the purview of the Board of Selectmen and the RTM. We're not supposed to determine what the service levels are, per se. under the charter. So, but I expected to see, and we've asked, Anthony's very good about getting us what the profit and loss is, based on your what you currently plan on spending on projects.
We don't have that for you tonight.
Okay.
We can. We'll
Yeah, I
put that
think if
together.
you could prepare that for us at a certain point for what your vision is right now as a board of what you think the capital projects are going to be and putting them into the budget for the next 10 years. Would be a very helpful document to us because we might all sit here and say, this is great, but I want to make sure it's profitable. Or,
kinda-
or at least break even.
Kind of like what the golf course did.
Yes.
Exact same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And do you guys, Anthony, is there anything like this for how does I know there's probably a profit and loss for There is. And how does that,
There is. The last one that I have is from last year, and it shows a net profit, I believe, of around 50,000, maybe closer to 60.
a year?
A year, yeah, and that was for last year, I believe.
So we're making $50,000, but I
By
know you guys had
62.
talked about doing certain projects. Have we looked at going forward when those projects would hit, and then how we'd, amortize that? Or
I haven't, but I can put that together and, take into consideration, the dredging and all that, the big ticket items that'll be coming up,
Okay.
because that'll obviously make a huge difference.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Ms. Desmond.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. So we're above the rate of inflation but below market, essentially.
That's fair.
So we're leaving some money on the table. But I don't know if perhaps prior to my joining the board, if we've ever seen a study or report on maintenance items for the marina that are absolutely necessary. There's must-haves, there's want-haves. So is there anything that an increase in rates needs to address? Or is it simply what would we want to do to enhance the property?
Well, I think it would require some more study on our part, but I do believe that the docks themselves might be reaching the end of their life cycle. That's been the feedback from engineering, so we'd want to look at that again. That would certainly impact any plans that we have going forward. It's aluminum floating in salt water. Don't know if that's going to last for 5 more years or 15 more years, but that is something that we want to look at.
What's the material that would be replacing that
I don't know.
technology, if you will?
There's different technologies. There's,
Yeah.
concrete docks, there's steel pilings. Right now, we have typical wood pilings soaked in, chemical.
Mhm.
So, again, we were just looking for some direction.
Yeah.
That's all. And we can certainly come back to you and say, hey, it makes us money, or it doesn't, for your approval. But instead of us going down a road that nobody was anticipating, I figured it would make sense to ask first.
Let me take a crack at this. You've provided us with some preliminary questions. I'm going to speak only for myself.
Yep.
Okay. I want to take it up a level, right? Get away from what materials are and all that kind of thing. We're a coastal community. One of our largest assets is our beachfront, right? It's incumbent upon us as stewards for the town, and I mean us globally, including yourselves, to maximize the value of our assets on behalf of the taxpayers. Now, that does not mean we want to take the marina and make it private so that our public citizens can't afford it and can't use it, right? And that we want to be the best thing since sliced bread for the $5 million yachts, right? So let's take that off the table. But that does mean, what does the business plan need to be to make us a very competitive marina that people will pay a bit more than the surrounding towns, get better amenities, and maximize both their experience as well as our value, right? That's what needs to happen, particularly when we're talking around our coastline, where there's so very limited real estate. Now, my colleagues have referenced, and I've referenced the Golf Commission report. I think that's a good starting point to look at what they did 7 or 8 years ago. But we need to take that up a level there because they already knew what their business plan was. So I don't think there's anybody on this board, I'll specifically speak for myself, I can't tell you what that looks like because I am in no way a marina expert and probably could not drive a boat for anything, okay? But you guys have a bit more of that. Maybe you want to go out and hire somebody to help you do that, but we got one shot at this to maximize the value of it. So I wouldn't think small, right? I would think, how do we maximize and drive the value of what we have? and make that as valuable to the entire town from a profit-generating standpoint and from servicing the community standpoint. So, where do you want South Benson Marina slip pricing to be relative to Fairfield County municipal marinas? In the short term, I want it competitive. In the long term, I want to charge a premium because I want people to really want to be there. I want a waiting list for people to be there. Not because it's cheap, but because it's so damn good that they want to be there. What improvements would you like to see over the next 10 years? As we've done and at the golf courses, I think, at least from our standpoint, we're willing to make improvements there if we can receive the return on investment there. If substantial improvements are to be made, what amenities should be considered? I have no idea. Can you do a survey and come back and say, what are people willing to pay for? If they're not willing to pay for, we don't want to do it. If they're willing to pay for it, do it. Do you have an opinion on municipalizing, I can't even say the word, do I have an opinion on it? Fuel dock operations? No, I actually don't at this point. I have no idea what would be considered in that, what the insurance responsibilities would be, all that. Again, is there profit associated with it? Maybe. Is there a report format that you would prefer for our plan? I would go back and look at the Golf Commission report. But really, this should be a business plan. When I'm in private business, I always say what I look for is the table thump. I want the guys that come here that say, I want you to give me hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in 2 years, I'm going to write you a check for $2 million, right? Because we've been so darn successful. I want the table thump. What is our business plan for the marina? That's my own personal view, but that's what I'm looking for when I talk about it. Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. DeWitt?
No, that's a great summary. My only addition to that would be, the only thing we ever hear about the marina is dredging every couple years, right? For me, if there were a plan that said, every 10 years we have to put in $250,000 for dredging, and you bake that in your business plan so that I never have to hear again that $250,000 is going out for dredging, that sounds like a better deal for me personally. So everything the chairman said, plus those big ticket things, and I mean, that sounds like a formula for success. I don't know if it's possible, but
Yeah.
it might not be, I don't know, but.
Mrs. Leclerc?
Yeah, I actually served on some kind of marina committee, like maybe 20 years ago or so.
Mary was 12.
Mary was.
And I
Wow.
I have spent significant time at the marina, and I no longer use the marina, but the things I would have liked to have seen while we were there, and what I would like to see on this chart for the future is, I think I'd like to see more local towns on here if they have marinas of their own, and also to see what they charge, but also what amenities they provide, because power and water are key things for some boats, and they may have them for large boats but not for small boats, and how that relates. Other amenities that I think you should look at are facilities, whether you have bathrooms and showers, but also like a gas, and also a place to purchase supplies. And we've never had really that much in that way, but that could be a way that we could raise more money for our marina, is having like a little place to eat, or that would sell food, like similar to the beaches.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
I know a little bit about, I don't have a boat at the marina, but I've been down there many times. So I know a little bit about the amenities that are offered down there now. But how does our marina compare to the other ones that you chose? And I'm talking about the municipal ones, so take Captain's Cove aside. But, and I don't know how you want to grade it, but say we were a B, we were good. Like, is Greenwich an A, or is Greenwich a C compared to ours? Because I just don't know these places. So, you know, we might say, oh, we look low. And then we might hear in letters to the editor, oh yeah, but those other places are a lot nicer. Or I don't know whether we'll hear that or not. If you could just give me some summary based on what you know of those other facilities, in general, just a quick snippet about each one and whether you think one's better than ours or worse than ours.
Before Andy does that, and I know he'll give you a great answer, I want to point out that in Fairfield County alone, there's only 4 municipal marinas.
Okay.
And I believe after that, you've got to go up to almost Guilford to find the next one.
Okay. Well, thank you for that background.
I just want to comment. I was at Longshore actually this weekend, and I was so completely amazed. I mean, I've been down there to ice skate and do various things, but it was so beautiful. It's run by the Parks and Rec, but they have space. They have a golf course down there. They have 2 restaurants. They have pools in the summer. They have tennis courts. There was a tennis tournament going on, and I was amazed, but it's not just a marina. So I think when you're giving us these comparisons of the municipally owned marinas, we have to look at our space and our, what we actually have room for. So anyway, just to comment that I was so incredibly impressed by what they have going on there, but it's a different model. It's not just a marina.
Right. Yeah, so I can give you a brief summary.
Sure.
I'll try to keep it as quick as I can.
Yeah.
I get off in the weeds, or I
That's
maybe
okay.
can talk too much. But I've...
That never happens around here.
I've scrutinized the Fairfield County marinas. I haven't done anything in Westchester. And I've looked up at Candlewood Lake, the Housatonic River, the Thames, the Connecticut River, all the way to New London. And I'm doing a report of the entire state. If anything, for my own edification, I'm happy to share it with anyone when I'm done. It's about 3/4 of the way there. But as far as Fairfield County goes, I think we're an A+, extremely safe both from storms and bad weather. It's secure. It's clean. It's a great place to be. And it's not surrounded by any kind of an industrial environment. It's common, Stamford, Norwalk, Bridgeport, New Haven. You've got O&G plants and lots of things around, highways above you. We don't have any of that. So it's just a grand slam. It's got a lot of things going for it. But what it lacks is a restaurant, a pool, a clubhouse, more dockage for transient boaters, people passing through. So, and as you may be familiar with in downtown Milford, all those things can tie in together where you have a municipally operated transient dock, Lisman Landing, adjacent to restaurants and shopping in downtown Milford, and it ties into making your downtown area a destination. That could be a challenge for us, but there's always shuttles and things. With the other 3 big Fairfield County towns that have a municipal marina, Stamford, Greenwich, Westport, it's not always a direct comparison. Greenwich is spread out amongst 4 marinas and a number of mooring fields, and they sort of specialize in smaller boats. When it comes to the big boats, they're far more expensive than we are. We sell fuel, they do not. They do have some staff, and they have a small marina that can wash the bottom of the boat when you're done in the fall and load your boat for you and do things we don't offer. Westport is the best comparison. I'll get to that in a minute. Stamford is a little bit unique. It's a big city feel. It has 2 municipal marinas. Neither of them offer electricity, security, and they're not cheap. So, and they don't have pools, they don't have clubhouses, they don't have restaurants, they don't offer any of those amenities. And they're more expensive than we are, but they're deeper into southern Fairfield County. Westport's probably the best comparison, and just in a nutshell, it's a larger body of water or boat basin with fewer boats, and their rates are slightly higher, I think, across the board. There might be 1 or 2 small exceptions. They have a similar wait list to us, and they have 2 facilities, Dimes and ER Strait. And ER Strait has a pool, but it's not directly linked to the marina like you would see at Brewer Yacht Haven in Stratford. I'm sorry, Brewer Stratford. But it's there, so it's the same parking lot. It could be a destination for your family. We could look at that. Another thing with Westport is their parking stickers are double the cost of our own. We're giving the boaters a complimentary sticker. Westport does not. But they're very similar in many other ways. I'd leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
So are the docks themselves comparable to what the docks we have?
Not exactly. Our dock system is aluminum with wood pilings, and we have sort of a Mediterranean style of tie-up for the bigger boats where there is no finger dock protruding, 90 degrees off the main walkway where you would walk beside your boat and get on. We do not have that. That's a sought-after, much-discussed issue. I'd love to see them someday come back, but by incorporating finger docks into your marina, it requires linear space on your dock, so then you're having to sacrifice the number of boats on the dock. And I think that can be done intelligently or implemented over time, so it doesn't really hurt as much. Westport's docks are concrete for the most part with steel pilings, and they all have their pros and cons and maintenance issues and their lifespan. Concrete is nice, it's stable, it can be repaired, but they're, I think, more expensive up front. Westport offers finger docks.
Thank you. Any other questions? From you gentlemen, are we being clearer on what our thoughts are here?
Absolutely.
Good. Helpful? Anything you want to follow up on?
No. Now we know that we have broad canvas to work with.
Great. Great. No, we appreciate the, we appreciate the dialogue, and come back to us and let us know how things are going as you progress.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for the discussion. Huh? Right. Thank you, guys. All right, item number 3 on the agenda. To hear, consider, and act upon a following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Whereas the Board of Selectmen accepted a federally funded 100% reimbursable disaster recovery community development block grant in this sum not to exceed $300,000 in order to undertake a community development block grant disaster recovery tranche 2 project entitled Pine Creek Dike Elevation Planning Project on February 3rd, 2016. And whereas said project is experiencing delays due to co-funder U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' inability to commit to funding 50% of the project costs, and whereas the Connecticut Department of Housing has reviewed the town's request to transfer said grant funds to the Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Project, and is willing to grant said transfer in the amount of $300,000. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of Fairfield is cognizant of the conditions and prerequisites for state assistance imposed by Part 6 of Chapter 130 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and that the acceptance by the town of Fairfield of a disaster recovery community development block grant to be used as additional funding for the Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Project in an amount not to exceed $300,000 is hereby approved, and further resolved that Michael C. Tetro, First Selectman, be and hereby is authorized to accept in the name of and on behalf of the town of Fairfield said grant, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to sign and execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. Further resolved that an additional $300,000 is hereby appropriated to fund said project. Do I have a motion to put that before us? Mr. Mottola, do I have a second? Mrs. Esmia? The item is now before us. Hello.
Hello. So I've been here to actually talk to you about this project before. The grant that we're moving the money from is not being funded by the Army Corps. They were going to do a planning grant to look at the possibility of raising the dike in Pine Creek. After talking with the Army Corps, they didn't have it in the budget, and they were going to have to get federal they're going to have to actually go to Congress to get the money appropriated, so that between the existing grant and the timeframes associated with that, it wasn't feasible. So we had just completed a coastal resiliency plan for the area of Riverside Drive, and the second recommendation in that plan was to replace those tide gates that we've talked about several times. And this money being transferred here would actually pay for the design, the investigation and design of that new bulkhead and tide gate system. So we'd actually be able to reduce the capital costs that we've presented to you before based on this design.
Okay. Questions, comments from board members? Mr. DeWitt.
So the grant covers the design, but as in number 6, we're still going to need to pay approximately $1.1 million to do the actual work.
That's correct.
So we'll get the design for free, but again, $1.1 million. I'm assuming that's in our waterfall, Mr. Mayor? I seem to read.
I'm hoping as the design progresses, we'll get more solid numbers. The numbers that are in the waterfall chart are actually from a plan, operation and maintenance plan I had prepared for all the tide gate structures throughout town. So I'll be able to provide better, solid numbers before coming forward again.
That's great. I saw the comment, the new bulkhead and culvert is being constructed to replace the old system. It's going to when replaced, it's still going to act just like the old system. Nothing wrong functionally with it, right?
So there'll probably be some design changes just to separate it from the bridge, actually, so that when the bridge needs to be replaced, it's not going to be, it's kind of Rube Goldberg together right now because of the age of the bridge and when the bulkhead went in. So it's, looking at
They didn't go in at the same time,
No,
obviously,
but they kind of ended up, when they did build the bulkhead, they laid a concrete slab, and they did some things that were going to separate it so that it's no longer, it's going to be improved design, basically.
So is there a plan to replace the bridge as well? Is that one of our other?
Not at
No.
this time, no.
Okay.
But I mean, you'd have to talk to Bill Hurley about that. I think that is down the line, but not as part of this project.
Got it. So when do we, just no kidding, have to do this? I mean, it's great that we're getting the design for free. I'm in favor of the $300,000, but when do we, no kidding, really have to do this?
As soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Mottola?
So I take it at some point you're going to go back and revisit the Pine Creek dike elevation and deal with that?
I think that's the plan. It's been put on hold. You'd have to talk to Bill Hurley and Joe Michelangelo about that. I think there's some discussion about that. Again, there's another project coming down the line a little bit where we're talking about the tide gates in that area too, and the culvert system, so.
Anybody else? Mr. Walsh?
Without this current grant, were the planning numbers in the waterfall as well?
Yes, that was one, the number I provided to you was one number. We were talking about actually just taking the planning design out of that so we could do that quicker. And then, but when we gave you that number last year, it was all inclusive, the design and the construction cost.
So if we accept this grant, the waterfall will go down?
I'm hoping so, yeah.
This amount for this, up to 300,000, whatever it works out to be, the final bid that's accepted will be deducted from the waterfall. How much is in the waterfall for planning? 300,000?
1.1 million.
Yes. So that included the planning?
That did, yes.
So hopefully if we take this, we'll be able to deduct
Hopefully.
the planning costs? What does hopefully mean? Because you don't know what the cost of the
Yeah,
other
because
bid's going to be?
when I give you that 1.1, I mean, that was more than just a shot in the dark, but it was, it was an engineer's estimate without doing any geotechnical investigation and, just kind of really looking at it. So, plus or minus 20 or 30% on top of that construction costs. Hopefully, once we have the plans designed, I'll have a good engineer's estimate, plus or minus 10%, 5%, which would be standard going out to bid.
So the waterfall won't go down initially until you get a final do an RFP for the actual construction
I
costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, If I may,
Well,
I'm looking at the
it would
waterfall, and
be
it's 1.116.
Yeah, I would have that number before, so I wouldn't go out to bid and then come to you for the money. I would have the engineer's estimate, which I'm hoping to have it in, March, April.
Great.
Timeframe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, Mrs. Esmond?
Is there grant money available for the project itself?
Probably not, and I don't want to get into too technical, but if we take, if we were to get FEMA funding for that, it might require us to build it to an elevation which would be much higher than, it might drive the cost up. So we're always looking for grants that are available, but I haven't seen anything. And I'll be honest, a lot of these community development block grants that you've seen coming down, I mean, they're not around anymore. We've been very lucky to be able to even actually move this money from existing grants into into this, because they have a time frame that's really 2019. They'll be clawing this money back.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Carey, I'm the Conservation Director.
Thanks. Any other questions on this item? I'll go to the public on this item. Anybody have anything on the public? And please just state your name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Dick Mahusky. I live at 241 Colonial Drive, and I'm the chairman of the Flood and Erosion Control Board. And as I submitted a letter to you, gentlemen and ladies, that the Flood and Erosion Control Board is aware of both the Pine Creek dike elevation project, which died because it's way too expensive for the Army Corps to fund in their normal course of business, and also of the entire Riverside Drive study. And as Brian said, the number 2 recommendation at the culmination of that study that we do to improve the flood mitigation for that side of town is to replace the existing tide gate structure with this new structure. So this is a good project, and the bottom line is, like, yes, we're going to get a necessary design engineering project done at no cost to the town. So it certainly seems like a great opportunity in my mind. I'd also like to put in a little plug for what you have seen come up in the waterfall project and what you will see come up in the future. The various tide gate installations we have around town, they're one of our main mitigators for coastal flooding. So keeping them in a good state of repairs, many of them are past their useful life and need to be replaced or totally rehabilitated. So I would, on behalf of Flood and Erosion, ask that you support any such measures, because they are needed to keep our flood basin as free of coastal floodwaters as we can.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for your service. Mr. Becker.
Just bringing up the Pine Creek, how much was that turned down with the Army Corps then? I mean, at this point, because
I think it was going to wind up being $7 million, and they, for their routine projects, they have a cap of, I'm making these numbers up, but they're relatively correct. So they have a cap of $5 million for a project. So this would have to go, above $5 million, their projects have to go to Congress for specific authorization, as I understand it. So this was not viable. This kind of also morphed into, I don't know if you recall, the Jim Himes $300 million study for all of coastal Connecticut that was touted maybe 2 years ago now, something like that. With the present economic climate all around, we haven't seen that going forward. The part of that was the state was going to have to come forth with some money for funding part of that $300 million study plan, and it's just not going to happen. So Pine Creek Dike is off. The other interesting thing is that we did have, maybe 2.5 years ago now, we had a meeting with the Pine Creek Residents Association to introduce the study that an engineering firm did for the town as to what might be necessary to have the Pine Creek Dike provide more mitigation of floodwaters than it currently does. And that was met with very little enthusiasm on the part of the neighbors, because after all, we had just had Storm Sandy, and Sandy didn't top the dike. And the fact that Storm Sandy was not the 100-year flood was of no great concern of theirs. And but one other thing that I'm surprised that I don't see more universal understanding of, when we talk about the 100-year flood, that is not what the sea level rise will wind up doing in 100 years from now. Every year, there's a 1% chance that we will have a storm of the 100-year storm category. So those things are right around the corner somewhere. Maybe not for 100 years, but maybe next year. We never know.
Yep. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I'm going to call this for a vote. All in favor of item number 3 on the agenda? Opposed? Abstention? That item carries. Item number 4, as I had mentioned earlier, has been held off by the Board of Selectmen, so we will come back to that at a later date. Item number 5 is to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen, resolve that a bond appropriation entitled a resolution appropriating $250,000 for the costs associated with the planning, design, obtaining cost estimates for the renovation or replacement of the clubhouse and golf cart barn in H. Smith Richardson Golf Course, and for other site and ground improvements, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, consisting of 3 pages, be and hereby is approved. Do I have a motion to put that before us? Mr. Walsh? We'll have a second by Mrs. Esmond. Okay.
Sure.
The item is now before us. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening again.
So, I thought this was off our waterfall, and we weren't going to be doing this. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Pretty self-explanatory request that we have here. The $250,000 is essentially seed money for the building committee to start the design and planning phase, to come back to you with solid numbers for the future funding request. I have Ryan Scully.
Sorry, Ryan Scully. I'm the chair of the Golf Commission.
Thank you for being here, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions from board members on this? We'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Is this a knockdown, start over kind of a thing, or renovation?
We're anticipating a knockdown.
Anticipating a knockdown, not a renovation.
Now, there's a restaurant in there now, right? Is it privately owned or rent? We rent to them?
We
or-
rent it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a concession for us.
Okay. And we don't have any agreement with them that binds us to not
No.
knocking the thing down in a year or 2 years from now?
No, in
No,
fact,
and they're
we're-
under the impression that it needs to be renovated, and they're glad
They're
it's
in
going
agreement,
to
huh?
be. Yeah.
And we were very specific with the last contract to make sure that that if that happened, it would immediately be terminated and we'd be able to put it back out to bid again.
Right. And what's the real driver here, other than I've seen the pictures, and I've been there, I've seen it, I've been to the restaurant there. It's tough-looking building, I get it, but, is there maintenance?
There's been no significant improvements made to the building in about 45 years.
Right. To be honest, I think we'd probably be forced to do some type of renovation for safety and code violations, regardless of whether or not we knocked it down or not, just because it's not up to energy code, the plumbing's terrible, the drainage doesn't work. It's just in pretty rough shape all around. So I think we'd be forced to do something one way or the other just to make it safe for the patrons.
And this is a possible solar project, too, I would assume, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mottola.
You probably don't know the answer to this, but is there any thought of, maybe this is part of the whole design phase, being able to use the building while you build another clubhouse? Is it going to be built right there? We just don't know yet.
We don't know yet. That'll all be part of the design phase once the building committee has the money and the people in place to design it. But that is definitely one of the
Part of the deal,
discussions.
okay.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily be in that footprint.
Correct.
It could be somewhere else.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question for you guys. Are we, did you want to go? Ms. Mormon, did you have a question? Are we thinking broadly enough here? You heard our conversation about the marina. Where are we in what you want to build?
Yeah, so I think we are, and the way we attacked this one, and this has been obviously in the plans for a
Correct.
number of years. But most recently, I really could speak for when I took over the Recreation Department. I went to the Parks and Rec Commission. I was asked to go to the Parks and Rec Commission and get their input. What do they want to see up at the golf course? Went to the Golf Commission. What do they want to see at the golf course, in the clubhouse? And between those two, we were able to basically blend together some ideas. And some of the things that were thrown around was, we could add paddle tennis courts up there. We could add an ice skating rink. So these are all things that the building committee has been charged with, and they have a whole, I think there's a list of 12 or 14 things on there, basically like building specs, like we do with our schools, that say we would like to have this. So now that we have the building committee, they can go out, price it out, and say, okay, well, it's going to cost us X amount, but if we cut these 3 things out, like a laundry list, basically saying, we could itemize it, and, we're going to do this because this is cost effective, but will leave us the space that we can do this down the road in the future. So I think we have, but there will be plenty more discussions.
I want to make sure when you guys come back, whenever that is, because every time we talk about Parks and Recreation in general, the marina, the golf courses, it's about these aren't, for lack of a better way of saying it, and forgive me, they're not essential services, right? They're amenities that we provide to the town that we would like to be self-sufficient or make a little bit of money on to help reduce the burden on the taxpayer. Correct. So when you guys come back and talk about putting in millions of dollars for a clubhouse, I would really like to start that conversation with what that business plan is for that clubhouse, what that return on investment is. And I do want to make sure you guys are thinking broadly, because much like with the marina, we get one shot at it to get it right. And as you guys said, it's 30, 40 years there. So I want to make sure we have the business plan, we know what the ROI is, and that we feel comfortable going forward that it's going to not only pay for itself, but help pay for other things as well.
Understood.
So I would ask that you guys do that when you come back. I'll go to Ms. Marmion, and then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, I was going to kind of go along the same vein based on what we were just talking about down at the marina. What are the other opportunities for town residents and to drive revenue, frankly? And, I'll put my plea in for cross-country skiing legally. I'm just saying, I know people do that, not me, per se. And then I'm also just curious about the timing. So you get the seed money, you get together, you put together a plan. When might you come back in front of us? And what's your ultimate goal in terms of starting some sort of design and construction?
I don't think we know what the timing is.
Yeah, we don't have
yet.
there's no timeline right this
It would
second.
be great if it was in the next, 18 months, but that
Yeah.
might be optimistic.
I don't see it.
know. Depending on what's going on. But, to your point, though, we have discussed things like cross-country skiing. The skating rink, and I think actually you were speaking about Longshore earlier, about doing a seasonal skating rink. That's something that Anthony's predecessor, Mr. Lombardo, was really interested in doing, and Anthony is as well. So I think that kind of goes into the design about what we were talking about with Mr. Mottola, though, is how are they going to position the clubhouse? Where would they put the skating rink? How would all that work? I think that all has to kind of be flushed out in the design phase.
Right, because, 4 seasons would be great.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
the bottom line.
And it would help us attract a better vendor, which would hopefully get a better contract with,
Right.
more, for everybody, so.
All right, thanks.
That'd be the plan.
Go ahead, Ms. Desmond, did you have something?
So yeah, I was thinking, of course, of revenue drivers, but if you were to use the same footprint, we could actually see, a reduction for a period of time in revenue, correct? Because of constraints on usage?
If we're out of service, yeah.
If we're out of
Yeah.
service.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, we could. I don't know how substantial it would be, but we could.
Okay.
The clubhouse isn't a huge draw up there now,
No.
frankly, so
Yeah, so
it's
it's
not something
marginal.
people are going up to do. People are going up to play golf. So I'm not sure how much of a drive it would be, but it would be. I'm sure it
Well,
would be a
it's
drag.
also, what you would do is factor it into the cost of the project. So you would
Right.
say the project costs $2 million, we're going to lose $200,000 worth
Yeah,
of
so
revenue. So the cost of the project is really $2.2 million, and you factor
right.
that into how you earn it back
Yep, exactly.
over time. Mr. Walsh, we'll go to you.
I thought I'd see a copy of the charge here. Where's the charge? This is the first time I'm hearing that you guys are thinking about possibly building paddle courts and other things. What other list of things is in that charge that you guys are looking
Sorry, I
at?
thought that was in the backup
Yeah.
material, so I apologize if it's not.
I have the charge actually right here, a copy of it. And we also did submit, I don't know what you want to call it, a wish list or?
The building specs.
The building specs as well, and that has all those materials in there as well, but mine.
Yeah, I don't think we see it here.
I can email that out to you
Mine
guys.
all has handwritten notes on it, so you probably don't want to see it, but.
Is it gonna, if we put this off for a month so we get a chance to see that, and look at it, and ask you questions about it, is that gonna throw off your timing?
Well, we've been waiting for
By
about
1
10
month.
years
Well,
now,
it's-
so.
Well, it's from 2008, and
I'm
the
optimistic.
committee charge was in 2015, the committee charge request, so.
The reason I'm saying that is, I know the clubhouse, obviously, something needs to be done up there, but all these other things that are in the charge and your specs and things like that, I'd like to see and look at, because what I don't want to get into is spending approving $250,000 in this thing, coming back at $5 million, and then saying no when we've lost $250,000. So I would like to put this off for 1 month, if that won't throw your timing off terribly. And then be able to come back and be able to ask you more legitimate questions when you come back next month. So I'm going to make a motion that we postpone to a date certain, that being our next meeting.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Becker, that motion is now before the board. Any questions, comments, concerns from board members on that? We'll go to Mr. Becker, and then we'll go to Ms. Leclerc.
Just, yeah, I'll support the motion for being postponed, but I'd actually like two things. One, I think the chairman is spot on in regards to, similar to our previous item here this evening and what we're looking for, but I think some of that information you probably maybe can provide now, even with the seed money, and then certainly much more detail when you come back for any sort of a larger appropriation. But I think it would be helpful. I think you do have some P&L information. I know that you guys obviously track some of the estimates of what's going on up there now, but it'd be helpful to get a better feel before just handing over $250,000. And then the other thing is specific to that, a little more of a breakout of where you want to spend that, what sort of vendors, what the estimated costs are. I know that we often give about a couple $100,000, but it'd be helpful to get a little better feel for the breakout and where you're coming up with that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Becker, you're asking for a breakdown of what's going to be spent on different portions of what the clubhouse
The
might be built prior to the
$250,000.
I'm sorry, prior to the $250,000 being appropriated?
The $250,000, a breakout of where that's going to go vendor-wise, architect,
Oh, okay.
50,000, whatever, estimator 50, some sort of a better breakout of the 250 would be helpful. That's one. And two, obviously a little better of a feel for the plan, which I think gets to part of why we're postponing this. But getting a little better of even just this existing facility and sort of how it fits in up there. And, what is the current vendor paying, what sort of expenses, get a little bit of a sense of just where we are now. Because I think a question would be, do we just rebuild the facility and say,
Yeah,
here you go?
I don't disagree with the information that you're requesting. I just don't think we're at that phase in the design. But
Well, you have to know where the 250's going, right?
Well,
The business plan.
requesting this 250 isn't any different than any other building committee that comes up here. This is the exact same process that every building committee has gone through for the seed money, and that's
Yeah.
for the design phase, which is what this is. When we come back with our plan, the business plan, and we're saying that, we're requesting $3 million for a brand-new clubhouse, it's going to have this, this, and this, well, then we have the breakout of, well, this is what it costs for the design fee, this is what it's going to cost for construction, this is our contingency. We can do that at that point, but I think it's premature to ask for that information now. That's just,
So you don't know what the income and loss related to the building and some of the general usage is now?
and of course I do.
So let's get an idea of that at least. Because
That
we're
if-
trying to build upon it,
But I
so.
think that's in the business case the chairman asked for.
Go ahead, Ms. Leclerc.
See, I'm kind of intrigued by the whole idea of different things that could go up here, but I'm not quite ready to give $250,000 for design because I don't know what the possibilities are, and I don't want this to morph into some huge project that the boards aren't behind. So I'm wondering, can this be broken up into two pieces? Give you a little bit of money to just start investigating what could possibly go on this thing before you get into a design phase? That's my question.
Mr. Tetra.
If I might, first of all, some of the questions are probably not being addressed to the specific group that they should be. The $250,000 is being requested to be given to the building committee. Not these two gentlemen, but the building committee. It's the traditional path we follow with school building committees in terms of giving them some money so they have some money to hire an architect to start to do some of the design, to address some of the questions that are being asked. One of the things we're trying to do on this project is the Board of Selectmen has worked with a committee of past building committee chairs to select an owner's rep so they can start right with the building committee. The building committee was nominated or by the Board of Selectmen last night, goes to the RTM at the end of this month. If this 250 can go to the RTM in October, it's with the sitting RTM. If it doesn't, then it goes to the RTM in November, which is their orientation session after election, where they have taken up some business in the past, but it's not traditional. So it just may take more than a month, it would be the concern there. The 250 is being spent, allocated to the building committee to hire the architect, to start with the owner's rep, to get started right away on doing this. In terms of the charge, the items that the committee put are not part of the formal charge to the committee. But we can certainly get you that charge.
Yeah, I think the key is what's the charge and what are those items that are being considered?
Those
And if we don't have the right people here to answer the questions as to, what's being posed, then let's have the meeting where we have the right people here to answer the questions.
Okay, that would be after the RTM confirms the building committee.
Then that might be the case. I mean, it's, I think what you're hearing from this board is that we want to support the project. You're not 10 years out any longer. You're on the cusp of getting your seed money to support the project going forward. I don't think we know what the charge is or what's being considered up there. And the question is, would we be wasting the 250 if you guys go off and come back with a bunch of stuff, or if the building committee does?
Well, no, that's what we've talked to the building committee about, is by getting the owner's rep on board right now, the idea is to basically increase the amount of communication early in the project, so they'll be coming back to the Board of Selectmen to address just what you said, to make sure there isn't that scope creep, to make sure that if there are items added in, they're also priced separately.
Absolutely.
So it's not part of a full package. And then it meets what the town's strategic needs are today, not what they were 10 years ago. So as we go
Thank
through
you for that. So if we get the charge, I think we'll be good, and we see what the things that are being bandied about are, right? I think we're all saying the same thing, right? Thank you. Questions? Mr. DeWitt?
I think just more of a statement, the seed money, right? In perspective, we've done this exactly twice, that we gave seed money to building committees. We did it for Riverfield, please. We did it for Riverfield. Was the first time we ever gave Tom Quinn seed money to go out and do work in advance of with the building committee, and then we just did it for Holland Hill. We've only done it twice. So there's slight reluctance, not reluctance against you guys, but, and second, this is a little different, and then schools don't generate revenue. This is a revenue-generating thing. So I'm in favor of Mrs. Leclerc's point where, is it better to have a 50,000 square foot restaurant, or is it better to have locker space? Maybe we make more money off of renting lockers than we do on a restaurant. I don't know, but I am in favor of maybe a. What are the options for the space?
The first question, we've been adding seed money into building projects for quite a few projects in quite a few years now. That's not correct.
You're incorrect. We've given seed money to exactly 2 building committees. What other building committee?
Pretty much everyone, because they can't hire, Chris, they can't hire.
Tom Quinn was the first person that got money to go out and spend before he got the full bonding to go out and in a preliminary way, get drawings and everything done for Riverfield. That was the first.
Right, if I might answer, every building committee has to hire an architect in order to do any drawings.
Some have hired two.
Yeah, well, right.
You can't hire an architect unless you have some money. We have always provided that money to building committees so they can hire an architect.
Yep.
So they can do the design.
I'm going to agree to disagree. It's always been in association with a bonding resolution.
Go ahead.
Whatever.
Mr. Leclerc.
My issue right now is I don't know what the project is. And before I lay out 250,000, I really want to understand where we're going with it. I don't want to give 250,000 and find out it's for something I don't think we should be considering right now. So I guess, but I am intrigued at all the different opportunities we have to add other things to this.
I think part of the problem is that it's going to be extremely difficult to provide a lot of those answers without first doing some of the design to figure out what can fit there, what are the options. I mean, we were talking about a skating rink like that as a possible option, but the architect might take a look at it and just say, you know what, there's no room, so we can't even do it. So I think you're asking us to provide a lot of information that we might not necessarily be able to do until we get a little further
I think that's
along
a
in the
fair point.
process. Do you know what I mean?
I think the thing that we're doing, which I appreciate what everyone's saying, but this is a little different than a school, because we kind of know what we're getting in a school. So I think we're not going to know exactly what the project's going to be, and I think we have to give a little bit here because they're going to need this money to. We kind of know what was going to happen there, but you want the money to explore some options that I think this board wants. That we want them to explore this to see whether or not we want to do A, B, or C.
I think
so it's a little different.
I think that point's well taken because, school buildings are clearly defined in one way, shape, or form, right? And this is not. I think it's also, what's the charge and what things are being considered. Now, it doesn't mean that all those things are going to happen. It doesn't mean that any of those things are going to happen. But I think a listing of, what are we looking to put on there? What are you exploring, right, to your point?
So you have the charge in front of you. Is it super long?
pretty long.
It's pretty long?
I'd like the
Then
opportunity
maybe
to
we,
read it.
Yeah, it's
maybe we need the
240.
opportunity to delay for a month so we can read the charge, because that might
Yeah.
give us a better
And that's the motion
understanding.
that I believe is before us right now. Yeah, Mr. Walsh.
I also think, based on Mr. Tetro's comments, that this whole thing with the current RTM versus the next RTM, it's the next RTM that's going to be voting on the funding, the full funding.
Full funding,
So
right.
to me, they should be on board with the 250. I mean, we're so close at this point in time. It just
Yep.
seems to me, if we're going to, we need to review this stuff. But I think they should be on board with it as well, on the 250,000.
Agreed. All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
just if I might. No, my point, Mr. Walsh, was you had asked what will 1 month delay, and I was just pointing out that it
Okay.
might be more than
I
that
appreciate
because
that.
of the timing.
Actually, to me, that makes it even an extra reason to punt it at this point
I
in
don't know,
time.
just trying to address your point on the
I
timing.
appreciate it. And just one other question, this is, this stuff better than I do. When we've given the $250,000 or seed money to these other building committees, the ones I can think of have been school projects. Have we always had an ed spec before we gave the 250, like at the time we're giving the 250,000?
We've generally asked for an ed spec, at least in recent memory,
Yep.
before we appointed the committee.
Yep.
So the committee would know what they were doing. So we'd have the 250,000 would come along with the committee and kind of follow the committee appointments through the process. So I think the answer would be yes.
Okay, and that's a little bit different here, because we're not going to have an ed spec. What you're asking for is $250,000 to almost prepare a spec. Because what you're really using this $250,000 is, hey, should I have a track up there? Should I have an ice skating rink up there? Should I have paddle court tennises up there? So we're going to be basically, in a way, I need to look at it a little bit more and think about it a little bit more, but in a way, using $250,000 of architect and maybe even engineering money and to see, whether it can support an ice skating rink, foundation-wise, all that, all the different experts you need for that stuff. But whether you can do these other various programs up there, which is to some degree a little bit different than a school where we're being handed by the Board of Ed, and Ed spec saying we want this many classrooms,
Exactly.
OPT, and it's a little different. So I think it's causing some confusion here because we've not really had a process like this.
No, I think that your point's well taken. I think it's very different in a school building. When you get an ed spec, this is what has to be in the building committee's charge is to build the ed spec. This is different. And the closest analogy, I think, it would be like looking at ed project. We had a bunch of ad alternates. So we know we have to have something that supports the golf course mission. We know we need a septic system. We know we need mechanicals. We know the facility now is in really tough shape, and we know the mechanicals are kind of past their useful life, so we know to get. We had a town facilities commission review the facility just to address those points. So this is not a want. This is very definitely a need from that standpoint. Now, what we do beyond that, what we do in terms of any extra functionality beyond that, what's necessary to support the golf mission, I'm certainly looking for is something coming back and saying, I want to see a price tag with each one of those. Because this is not an ed spec. We do not have to do those. We have to support the golf mission. Everything else is optional. And we want to know what the costs are and whether we can do those, as was suggested. Can we make them plug and play? Can we set it up to say, look, we're not doing this now, but we can add this 5 years from now if we choose. We can plug this in and get that. And if we have the option of taking this facility, as was mentioned earlier, and making it more of a 12-month-a-year facility, then that would be great, because then we get a lot more usage for our taxpayers, for our citizens, out of something rather than just a summer golf course.
Yep.
When this building was built, it wasn't built to be used in the winter. And you see that with the lack of insulation and the increase in energy costs over the winter. So those are some of the functional things we know we need to address. The others are definitely options.
All right,
What's the placeholder right now in the waterfall for this project?
Approximately $3 million.
That's what I thought.
$3 million.
So we don't seem to have a lot of money, to build a building from what I've seen before. I guess we're really going to have to look at what we can do. It's not like there's a lot of extra fluff in here based on what I've seen buildings cost that we've built before to do other things, but, okay. But it'll give us some time
All
to
right.
think about it.
Let's, anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to call this item for a vote.
I'm sorry, before you vote, just to be clear, exactly what you're looking for from Anthony and I before, is just a copy of the charge?
No,
As well as a copy of
listing of
the
things that are being
buildings-
considered.
The building spec that's being considered. Okay, thank you. I apologize.
Sure, and the functionality, not just the spec, but we're looking at these items that are being considered. Hockey rink.
Yep.
Paddle
Yeah,
tennis.
it's on the website. So
Okay,
I'll
we
just
got
pull
that.
it
That's no
tomorrow.
problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to make sure that was all you were.
Okay,
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to see the head of the building committee present at the next meeting.
absolutely.
We,
He hasn't been
You
approved yet.
understand
Oh,
that
hasn't been appointed yet.
he hasn't, nobody's been appointed to the building committee yet.
Oh, okay.
And the building committee hasn't met, they haven't had their orientation session, and they haven't picked a chair. So there is no head of the building committee. That certainly you could have for your December meeting. I'm not sure that would all be accomplished before that.
Let's try to do this at the November meeting. Let's see the information that these gentlemen provide, and then we'll go forward with what we need from the building committee from there, okay? So, any other comments? Yes?
Just to clarify, so this seed money gets us to the point of an ed spec, if we want to compare it to a school project, and then we may need more seed money after that to get to whatever that next level would be in a school project. This is it.
This should be it.
this should be it.
Yeah, I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're definitely
Correct.
not asking the right person. I'm a lawyer, not an engineer, but
Yeah.
I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't think there would be additional.
Okay.
No.
No, it should be paid
and
for
this
out
is
of the
coming out of the
250.
yes.
If you spend 100, come back to us, tell us what you're planning, and then spend the 150 to spec it out. Right. All right.
On $3 million, this is 8% of the money.
Correct.
So you are, if you spend this on looking at every possible whatever, and you need design plans, then it's going to be a problem.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor of the motion to move this to date certain, which will be our November meeting? Opposed, abstentions, that item moves. Thank you, gentlemen. We're sorry you have to come back. We're going to take a short recess and come right back with item number 6. All right, we're back live, and we're at item number 6, and this is a carryover item from the last meeting where we had some follow-up questions. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Chief Fiscal Officer to approve transfers as of June 2017. You will recall this item relates to, there's really two tranches. There's about $50,000, it's $49,000, transfer from legal services to cover other expenses in other areas of town to true up kind of the budget activity, the general fund activity. And then the second item is actually transferring overages, or rather underages in spending to debt service so that we can offset that for 2018 budget implications. We did a similar thing last year, and it helps insulate us from what's going on at the state. It's not something that we want to do as a continuing practice year after year after year after year, but in a pinch, it does work and allows us to maintain the tax rates. We had questions related to legal fees on this item and some other questions as well. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you for what you provided us and what information you have for us tonight, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple quick comments. As was pointed out from the board last night, last meeting, to myself, that there was a major invoice that, well, basically, just back up more, we're talking about the favorability in certain departments, and someone asked, you realize that favorability in legal even with the cost of the special election? And that brought up, well, there is an invoice out there that hasn't been paid, that's not included, and was not included in any of the A, B, or C schedules, and it was not included on this, on the funds transfer schedule. So a couple of things. First one is, so you have a revised funds transfer schedule that has adjusted the legal services transfer down by $55,000 because the questioned invoice is for $55,000. During that discussion, the board requested information on the costs of the election to the town, and so what you have in one of the packages that was placed on your table before the meeting, you have a schedule that has the 3 attorneys that have worked on the special election for the town. As the board knows, there's also other attorneys that work for the, I guess it's the plaintiff, or the, but those costs are not town costs and don't go through the town. So we have page 1, the top page, you see is the special election invoices. You got the lesser firm whose charges total about $5,900. There's no unbilled amount. They're all paid. You see the billed amount, unbilled amount, total charged, check number, and check date. And if where there's a check date, that means that the billed amount is the amount that's been paid. You have Attorney Morin, billed amount, unbilled amount, and total charge, not total charge because it's not unbilled yet. Should probably better say total incurred to date. Check number for the billed amount, 4368, and the check date. And then you have Mr. Baldwin's bill, Coles, Baldwin, and Kaiser, the billed amount. Now, I reached out to these attorneys to get the unbilled, but I was out of town for the last 4 days and did not reach out to Mr. Baldwin until like this afternoon late, like about 3 o'clock, after 3 o'clock, and he wasn't in a position where he could access his unbilled amount, so that number's unknown. So that's what you have. And then the backup to the schedule, you have the invoices. Mr. Lesser bills the town for multiple projects, so you have the full invoice for the invoices that included the special election charges. You have the Moran invoice, and you have the Coles, Baldwin, and then Kaiser invoice. Questions, comments?
We just got this document, so
Right.
while we can discuss it now, since it's a pretty lengthy document, I'm going to hold open our opportunity to discuss this at a later meeting as well, given there's so much documents that were just provided to us. So, and Mr. Mayor, thank you to you and your staff for putting this together in relatively short order for us.
I'm sorry I didn't get out earlier, but as I indicated, I was not here.
Okay, questions, comments from board members? Let's keep it right now on these special election documents, and then we can go to the transfers as a whole. And, Mr. Mayor, just so that we're aware, and I just want to reiterate, these transfer numbers have been adjusted, so now the year-end June 2017 will include the $55,840 that
Correct.
had been billed but had not been accrued or recognized in the town's ledgers as of
Absolutely
last
correct,
week.
sir.
Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns? Mrs. Marmion, go right ahead.
So it's just my understanding, I just need clarification, that the Coles, Baldwin, and Kaiser bill, that's kind of being looked at right now by an outside attorney who's taking a look at various issues with the bill, so we don't have a determination yet of whether or not or how much would be paid of this bill. Is that the status? So we want to hold money in reserve to pay that, transfer to hold it in reserve so that we can pay the bill once we have finished that investigation? Is that what's going on?
I can only answer that to a certain extent. The town has received a bill, as you have before you, in that amount. I, of course, have no reason to question the bill. I'm not a legal, authority in any sense of the matter. The CEO's office is, and the town attorney apparently have some questions, and those would probably be better addressed to the first selectman or the town attorney.
Mr. Tetra, you want to come up?
Certainly. How can I help?
Mrs. Marmion's question.
So can you just explain to us the status of this bill, where we are with it, what you're recommending that we do in terms of transferring it?
It was a fairly large bill that came in July. Obviously, because of the nature of this, the size of the bill, there were some questions that came up, and we thought it best to have an attorney review this to address those answers, and preferably somebody outside the town, so it wasn't part of the town process. It seems to make sense, because we haven't made a determination that there's anything that is inappropriate or anything that shouldn't be paid as part of that the entire invoice be reserved for.
So I'm just curious, what's our timing on getting some input from the attorney? the
We
outside
asked them to do
attorney?
it on a timely basis. We're hoping to hear back in the next couple of weeks.
When did you ask him, Mr. Tetra?
I asked him for an update on that about a week or so ago.
When is there an engagement letter? Is this guy engaged?
I don't know if there's an engagement letter. I worked through the town attorney on that. I can certainly check.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Who is this person or firm that's doing this review for the town?
It's attorney Stephen Conover. It's my understanding he's pretty well known and pretty well respected within legal circles.
Is he looking at any of the other legal bills?
We don't have as many questions on those. This was bigger than expected.
But there was, I guess there was 4 attorneys against 1 attorney, correct, in this matter?
I don't know about 4 attorneys.
Mr. Green?
Mr. Green doesn't work for the town.
But Mr. Baldwin was, in the litigation, was battling Mr. Green. He was battling Mr. Burke, Liam Burke. He was battling your attorney, correct? Mr. Moran?
Yeah.
And at points in time, you were represented by Stan Lesser, correct?
I don't believe Stanton Lesser ever represented me directly on that. However,
He had an
the
appearance
question...
in the file on your behalf.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I have it here if you want to see it, when he had an appearance on your behalf.
I don't mean to question what you're saying, Mr. Walsh. I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay.
There were some questions that came up. We're just trying to review them professionally and make sure that the answers are done, frankly, from somebody that hasn't been involved in this. And the only person internally might be Stanton Lester to do that. We thought it best to get somebody else.
Well, Stan's part of the whole thing. It would really not be proper for him to do it, I don't believe.
That's why
I think he'd actually have a conflict of interest.
That's why we stepped outside to do it.
Okay. And I just don't understand, because it just, on the outside, looks political. I'm just telling you, my own personal opinion. It looks political when every other invoice is paid by, right? There was no delay on paying any of the other invoices. I mean, I haven't had a chance to look at it, so I will reserve my right to have another further meeting about this. But from what I see right here, none of the other invoices were delayed, and everyone has been paid.
They were paid on a timely basis.
They were paid on time. And except this one. And with the politics that were involved in it at the time that I was reading about in the paper, seeing play out live at some of the meetings, it just seems odd. And it just, the optics of it are horrible.
The optics of the key issue is we want to make sure that we're paying everything we're obligated to pay.
Yeah,
When an invoice is held up for 5 months, we get it all at once. It's this big. There were some questions raised about it. In fact, it was one of the reporters in the paper raised a question about whether some of the charges were appropriate on that, and we want to make sure that we answer all those questions. And that's what we're taking time to do. That's the obligation of the town, to make sure we do that.
Okay, but there's invoices being held on behalf of your personal counsel, Mr. Moran, because his last bill, what was the date of his last bill? April 20th, okay? So I went on the judicial website, because I'm just not familiar with this case. So I started getting concerned about what you said were irregularities. So I go onto the judicial website, and Mr. Moran had to do work in May, June, July, probably August, because the appeal's there. And in the appellate court case, he has a brief that's talked about in that stuff. So all during these last 5 months that you talk about, that he was delayed in getting him, this is why it starts looking political, because Mr. Moran says, Mr. Mayor has provided us a statement that says you talked to him, correct? And there's $4,000 worth of billing that he has that we've yet to receive an invoice on, correct?
That's a correct statement.
Okay. And I'm willing to put forth all the court matters that are on both the Superior Court docket, the appellate docket, and the Supreme Court docket, which have dates all throughout them, where he has an appearance, Mr. Moran has an appearance in for you and has to respond to things. Legally has to respond to things, or else it's malpractice. But I don't see an invoice for this $4,000 after 5 months.
And I promise you, we won't pay him until we have an invoice.
No, but you're saying you're holding it up, but yet,
Now, I'm reviewing something we have because it came in with 5 months or more worth of billings, and there were some questions on that. So we were having somebody review it. As you said, somebody outside, we had to engage we had to find somebody, we had to engage somebody. We've asked him to get to it on a timely basis.
and we're getting to the point, I think, and we could probably do this as a town, because I used to work for large firms, and those large firms and a lot of insurance defense counsel work, they have people who audit every single bill. And, they get paid by taking a third of whatever they save you. So what is their goal? To try to save you money. Because the only way they're going to get any money is by saving. And you have to sit here and you fight and there's an appeal process. And we could pay those expenses. It's just that our legal fee line, if we're going to start doing that across the town, which we can have a conversation about right here, is going to skyrocket. is going to skyrocket if we start applying this same standard. And this is just never a standard that, since you've been first selectman, have you ever sent a legal bill out to be reviewed?
No, I've never waited this long to get one.
Well, you
And I've
are
never
with
had
Mr.
one come
Moore,
in
so
and
it's your
sign.
second time. Mr. Moore hasn't supplied a bill in 5 months either.
Yeah, but
All the
his-
work that he's done.
At this point, his fees have come in considerably less than anything close to this. And if he does present us a bill like this, then we may very well do just that.
And I would suggest that Mr. Moran, I mean, if while I was on there, I started reading some of the stuff. I'm an attorney, I'm interested, I started reading it. I'd suggest that the work that he did is a lot less, because basically what he does is he piggybacks on all the logic that's in another, Mr. Green's brief and Mr. Burke's brief. It basically says, I agree with all that stuff, here's 3 additional points. And has no law in those briefs, which I don't even know, I've done appellate briefs, I don't even know how you do that. You don't have any supporting legal case that supports them. But
believe
I'd
that-
like to take
yeah.
a look at this longer. I say it from the looks of it, and then, when I read briefly, because we've got, how many pages here, Bob? 40 or 50 pages of stuff here? For the first time, and it was laid on our desk before we started.
That's
I'd like
correct.
to reserve our right to review this, but I will tell you, when I go through Mr. Lesser's and Mr. Moran's bills, that I just turn the page and look at it, they have a charge for 5 words. I'll tell you, when I'm billing by the hour, or any of the firms that I've billed for, that would be rejected out of hand, those charges, without explanation of what it was really about. So I'm just telling you how it looks tonight for what we're here for. It's this, we have to take a certain amount. I do not want to hold up a transfer, but I think we're going to have to add more onto this, reduce that, or increase the amount that we accrue for the legal department. Based on the numbers I'm seeing, I'm going to put because we have to pay this firm that's looking at these bills that were from before June 30th. How are we billing? How are they billing?
Right off the top of my head, I can't tell you.
Did you sign a letter of engagement?
I don't believe I did.
Did you sign a retainer agreement?
I don't believe I did. They were hired by Stanton Lesser to work for us in that regard.
And there's no one knows what we're paying them at all.
That's not correct.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to have Stanton Lesser here that night as well. Sure. And we'll go through that. And prior to that meeting that we have that at, which I suggest should be the next meeting, I think we should get any updated bills from anybody, that engagement letter, what it entails, and that attorney down here. The question.
And what attorney down here?
The attorney that's doing the review.
On what basis? This board,
To talk about it.
that really is the job of the administration, Mr. Walsh, not the job of this board.
Request of what I'd like to say.
That's your request, but that is not the job of this board. What's before you is the transfer. What's before you is reserving an appropriate amount for the legal bill. That all makes sense. Interviewing the attorney who's doing work on reviewing the bill is not part of that at this point.
I don't understand how, with you and your conversations with Mr. Lesser, with wanting to start going down and having our legal bills reviewed by this firm and this attorney, how we don't know, and you can't tell me what our legal arrangement is with them. Whether it's contingency, whether it's by the hour, what the hourly charge is, what the estimates of
We
costs
can,
are.
I don't have that off the top of my head this evening. We can certainly get you that information.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Walsh,
Mayor.
if I may, I can interject a little bit here. In my conversations with Attorney Lesser today, I asked that same question. He said that it's hourly, and he wasn't certain of the hourly rate. He said it was a discounted hourly rate, and he said it was between $2 and $2.50 an hour is what was what he recalled.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The second comment I want to make, which is more relevant to the transfer, this person is engaged in doing the work this year, so it would be a fiscal year 18 expense and should not be on the transfer sheet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm not sure of that.
It's true.
I'll defer to the chairman in regards to that, because
That's
it
proper
appears to
accounting.
be reviewing 2017 work.
Yeah, it's the work is taking place in 2018, though, so it would be a 2018 charge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Mr. Matoli, you've been patient.
Yeah, and then I'm all for reserving the money. I'm not sure, Mr. Walsh, what you want to look at and what authority we, as a board, have to look at and question legal bills. So I don't know what's going to be on the next agenda, and so I'm not sure where you're going with that. That's beyond our scope. I mean, if the legal bill's in order, it should be paid. I think the red flag here was it was a substantially greater legal bill compared to the other firms that were working on the very same case. And I think we're doing our due diligence here, that's all. And it may all be justified, and if it is, I'm a lawyer, I'd be the first one to pay it all, but I think the administration is doing
Shark's
its
courtesy.
due diligence, that's all. So,
Mr. Matoli, can I thank you for that? Because I want to, I'm going to take a different tact here, and I appreciate your comments on that. Here's what concerns me a little bit about this whole situation, and it has nothing to do with the review of the legal bill, because I think actually that's appropriate, right? In terms of reviewing bills, if you have questions on them, is completely appropriate. It's, as a finance person, I would say, that's due process, due care that things get reviewed. I understand that. What concerns me are three things. Number one, the fact that the invoice was dated July 10th. It was received. It was actually stamped as received on July 10th. The fact that it wasn't recorded in the financial statements that we looked at or are preparing to look at as of last week and wasn't forwarded to the finance department to be properly accounted for. Even if it's in question, you would put up an accrual for it. That concerns me from a governance standpoint, okay? From a control standpoint, a governance standpoint, and from a reliability of reporting standpoint, although in a $280 million budget or whatever it is, this is a little bit less than materiality. It's still a large number. The second thing is, Mr. Tetro, just the way we treat our vendors in total, right? The bill was received on July 10th. Understand it was for a few months. As we've said, that doesn't appear to be different, okay? We have another attorney who's billing the same way, and some of his bills previous are for many prior months as well. My concern here is, if this review was expedited, why is it not done? Because we're asking a vendor who actually happens to be a previously retained town attorney to wait over 90 days to get paid, when all the other attorneys were paid within a couple of weeks of their bills being submitted. So this bill was submitted on July 10th. If you had told me that it was out for review on July 15th, and then it was back by August 10th, I would say, okay, I get it. This is July 10th to October. And you just said, I talked to the guy 2 weeks ago. We obviously haven't received any bills from this gentleman who's doing it. He hasn't reported back, and I don't even know when his review started. So that seems like pretty poor financial management, quite frankly.
No, actually, it took us, we obviously couldn't do it with Attorney Lesser as we normally do it, and if we did, the timeline that you originally laid out might be more appropriate.
It doesn't take too
We
much
had
to
to-
find an attorney.
No, we had to find him, though. We did. We had to interview him and make sure he could take the job.
So it took 2 months?
It took a certain amount of that time, yes.
It didn't take 2 months.
It did not.
Okay, so...
I'm not saying it did, you're saying it did. What I'm telling you is we took it one step at a time, found an attorney, he had to confirm that he could do the job with the town. We then handed him the material, he's been reviewing that, and he will get back to us on a timely basis. That's all.
Okay, so what's the timely basis he's going to get back to us on?
I don't have a date at this point.
Okay, so when did he start reviewing the materials?
I can get you that date.
Okay, because Attorney Baldwin spoke to me, and because he saw our meeting last week, and he was unaware that his bill was out for review. He had not been told that. And regardless of what's going on the politics side of it, I get it, right? But for a vendor to be waiting 60 to 90 days and not even be told that we have questions on your bill, that's highly irregular in the way I
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure he hasn't been told that, so I would have to follow up with that, but I think he has been notified.
He wasn't. He wasn't. At least,
Yeah,
that's
as
what
I
he told
said,
me.
I don't...
He said, Tom, the first
That
thing...
may not be correct, but I will have to follow up on that.
Okay, because that's a pretty poor way to treat any vendor, is to say, after 60 days, by the way, we're not paying you, and we're going to put it out for review, and we'll get back in touch with you when we want to pay you. And again, I'm not arguing,
Yeah, and I'm just not sure it happened the way you said, so I will follow up on that and see.
because that doesn't look, no, that's not fair to anybody.
Yep, and as I said, I'm just not sure that's the way it happened.
So those things bother me. And to Mr. Walsh's opening point, it does make it look poor.
Yep, and again, we're going to make sure that the charges are correct before we pay them, that's all.
Just make sure they're correct on a timely basis, that's all I'm saying. Or incorrect. I don't care. I care from a financial standpoint, but I'm not getting into that quagmire. What I'm talking about is we owe a proper level of due diligence and timeliness both to the taxpayers and our vendors, particularly when it appears we're treating other vendors differently. And that's not right.
And that's not what we're doing.
It is.
I'm sorry, I disagree. Yes.
Good. Show me the check then, or show me the check dates. 10 days, 90 days. It's not right.
No, we were able to review those other bills because they were both timely and smaller at the time. This one was a much larger bill
The one
with many
wasn't
more
timely,
items.
and we got another one out there. I hope we'll hold it 3 months, too. It's just not right.
We have another, actually, we have attorneys, I don't know how they finance their businesses when they bill this late, but we also haven't been billed by, this is the only bill we received from Mr. Baldwin so far, so we'll have probably another one covering 90 days, I assume, pretty soon.
We probably will. Go ahead.
I apologize because I missed the last meeting, so I just want to confirm I'm understanding correctly. So this bill was received by the town on July 10th, but it didn't get recorded by Mr. Mayor in our accounts payable system? Did it
Correct.
get forwarded to him? Because to me,
it was-
that's an internal control problem that we...
Correct.
It's my understanding, everybody was aware of that bill. In fact, it was discussed at a Board of Selectmen meeting, was on the front page of the paper, and it was my understanding we were all aware of that in town. Again, I have to follow up on what happened, but I thought Finance had been notified.
Last week, Ms. Bazzi indicated that they did not have that bill in finance for whatever reason. She sent out several, from a financial control standpoint, she followed exactly the process that I would have had her followed. For notifying department heads of any invoices that they had, make sure they got them in. Any invoices they had, make sure that the finance was aware of them. That didn't happen with this invoice being forwarded to finance, according to the finance department. Now, to Mr. Tetra's point, it was discussed at a Board of Selectmen meeting, and it was in the press. That's all fair, but it was not recorded in the financial system, and it was not approved and/or in finance as of the close. So last week, when we looked at the transfers, we looked at, actually, what we were looking at is the variance of where we were coming out for 2017, and we had a large positive in legal expense. And I was the one who actually questioned, gee, how could we have that large positive given the expenses we incurred on the special election?
Correct.
Right? And that's how this whole thing came rolling, and it rolled right into the transfers and what money was left available to transfer into the next year. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, everything you said is absolutely correct. One of the other thing I'd add, Mr. Clare, is, we do our best to accrue what we think should be accrued, but I can't look at every invoice, and I was aware of this as Mr. Tetro and the body, everybody, is aware, but I don't go through and make sure that every invoice that's outstanding is properly accrued.
Mike, when
But
Ms.
this one was visible enough, I could have thought
Bossy
about
sent
it.
you those emails asking to all department heads, including your own, that the First Selectman's Office, which is a budgeted area, for every invoice that was outstanding for 2017. Why didn't you produce this invoice to her?
Two things. One, I don't remember those specific invoices or emails coming to me directly. Second, it was my understanding finance knew about it.
When did you first get this invoice, Bob, in your department?
Well, we never had the invoice, but, I mean, I was aware the invoice existed. But like I just indicated, I don't make sure every invoice that I'm aware of is properly accrued. This one is highly visible, and I should have thought about it, but I,
No, because when I asked you the other day about any other invoices, you said, not in our department.
no,
Then-
no, we
then
do
I
not
had to- Then I
have,
had to say, okay, in any other departments, and then you said that it's in the First Selectman's department.
right, it was never forwarded. We only paid approved invoices.
But you have to know about, when Ms. Bossi sends that out, she's
Ms.
asking for all
Bossi's-
invoices, whether they're approved or not approved, right? Because we have to pay everything for
Yeah.
2017 pursuant to our auditors and
We'll
everything.
pay it or accrue it, yes.
Yeah.
What should
And-
happen is, if there's an invoice out there that a department head has a question on, right, this is common practice, they should write to the finance department or call them up and say, hey, I've got an invoice here from Dewey, and it's for $20,000. I'm reviewing it. We're going to owe some aspect of the $20,000, maybe not the entire 20 or whatever. And then finance and the department head book an accrual for that invoice. That did not happen in this instance. Right?
Correct.
Based on what Mr. Flynn said, you have an invoice since July 10th. You tell the press when it's released to them that you're in the process of reviewing it. Why doesn't Mr. Baldwin receive, based on what Tom's conversation with Mr. Baldwin, why doesn't he ever receive a phone call or someone sit down with him and say, come on in, we need to discuss this because we found some, quote, irregularities, and have a conversation with them? Because anytime I've had a client who's thought there's either, they don't call it irregularities, but question a charge, they always call me directly and say, Jim, got your bill. Everything looks great, except a charge that's on March 9th, did we really meet for an hour, or was it 25 minutes? Refresh my memory, or why did this motion take so long? And we have a conversation about it, and normally I show some billing sheets and explain why to a layperson that might not seem like a summary judgment motion, might not seem like it should take a long time, but how if I win, it's going to get him completely out of the case and save him $100,000. So why wasn't a conversation had? Because I'll tell you, as an attorney, if I'm sitting there waiting for money from, it's dated June 30th, it's received July 10th, you're not receiving anything, you're thinking everything's fine, because it's really only 8 pages. I mean, this is something that you could start reviewing and go through in an hour. 9 pages, excuse me. If it goes on to the 10th page. I mean, seriously, you can go through this thing in like an hour. And an attorney specifically, one that we have on our general, the town attorney, who's familiar with it, could meet him and talk to him and say, why was this take so long, or whatever, and have a conversation. I just don't understand.
I'm not sure he wasn't told, so.
What?
I said I'm not sure he wasn't told.
Okay, could you find out whether he was told that there was irregularities and what the reasoning was?
I can follow up with that, yes.
That's fair.
Okay.
Thanks. Let's continue with the transfers. Any other questions, comments? This has been adjusted for the 55-8. Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments on these transfers?
I just want to find it.
Sure.
I'm not quite there yet. This one, right?
Yes, it's this schedule. Do we need to label this schedule by reference to it? This is the transfers. Let's call it Exhibit A. Okay.
It was in the handouts from this evening.
Correct.
It was in the handouts that were in the email.
Since we're
Not-
talking
not the
legal,
ones that
we'll
were-
talk Exhibit A.
It's illegal. I printed it.
Good idea. Exhibit A. Anybody? Questions, comments, concerns?
I can't find it.
Mr. Mayor, how much was added on or subtracted from to accrue for?
55,000.
Okay, well, the invoice is for 55.8, so it seems to be closer to 56.
Okay, do you have a motion?
And there may be late fees or something if we didn't pay on time. So I'm just going to say, why don't we just move it up to $60,000?
Okay. So why don't you make the motion, well, you're going to have to reduce this
Yeah.
by $5,000, so you want to make it,
$1,470.
so
Well,
can
the
you make-
motion, if I may,
Yes.
what we would do is transfer the 5,000 into conservation, because there's room in conservation. So what the motion that I'd like to see is to reduce the transfer from legal services from 43,000 to 38, and to increase conservation from 55 to 60.
Do you accept that, Mr. Walsh?
Sure.
Do we have a second to Mr. Walsh's motion? We have Mrs. Leclerc. That motion is before us. Just the amendment. Does anybody have a problem with?
So the amendment is because you think this bill's going to be more?
It may be more, maybe,
Well,
I don't know.
fees
what it's gonna
associated
be.
with the
Plus,
bills.
there's also, number one, the calculation's wrong by $1,000 right off the bat. I mean, the bill was $55,800.
Okay.
And we lowered it to $55,000.
So
I wanted to raise
part
it
of the reason is you think Mr.
$6,000.
Baldwin's legal bill's going to be more
I don't
than
know
this.
what it's
The
going to be.
finance department has no problem with that, Mr. Mattone.
Okay, I'm just curious
Just so you
why I
know.
was doing it.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, let's vote on amending this by $5,000, reducing the transfer. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So now, the item as amended, the transfer, so now the total of those, that one specific area is $1,470,000 versus $1,475,000, correct, Mr. Mayor?
No, the total stays the same, because we added one and subtracted one.
You're right. Thank you very much. My apologies. It stays the same, but the transfer
Very
is
rare
different.
mistake for the chair.
You should speak to my wife. She will fill you in. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Anybody? Seeing none, I'm going to make the motion that we approve these transfers as of June 30th, 2017 to debt service. Do I have a second to my motion? Mrs. Marmion, all in favor? Opposed, abstention, that carries. Your transfers are done. Please tell Mrs. Bossy, thank you very much for waiting on that.
And thank you, guys.
All right, the next item,
And we're going to give you another presentation at our next meeting on this, so we have a chance to review this.
yes, I'll work with Mr. Mayor. We'll put this as an item on the legal bills.
Some of the things we requested, such as the
Mr. Lesser will ask that he be here, and we'll have more time to go
retainer
through.
agreement, if any, with the review company.
Absolutely. If anybody has any specific requests or comments on this, please email them to both myself and Mr. Mayor, just so we can make sure we have the right discussion. The next item, item number 7, is to approve the minutes of September 5th, 2017, and September 19th, 2017. Those meetings, days were included in our package. Can I have a motion to put those before us? We'll take Mr. DeWitt, we'll take Mr. Mottola. Any other comments, questions, concern on these minutes? Anybody? Seeing none, all in favor of the approval of these minutes? Those opposed, abstentions, that item carries. I believe it was unanimous. All right. The last item of the night, to hear, consider, and act upon any
Mr.
other
Chairman?
communications. Mr. Walsh.
I'd like to make a motion to add something onto our agenda. And
Okay.
it's a sense of the body resolution, which I'll read, and I'm going to ask that it be added to our agenda, which I know needs to be approved by a two-thirds majority. That motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Finance of the Town of Fairfield hereby strongly supports the General Assembly overriding the governor's veto of the state of Connecticut's legislators' bipartisan state budget adopted by the State Senate on September 15, 2017, and by the House of Representatives on September 16, 2017, and whereby we request that State Representative Brenda Kupchak from the 132nd District, State Representative Krista McCarthy Vahey from the 133rd District, and State Representative Laura Devlin from the 134th District, and State Senator Tony Huang from the 28th District vote to override the governor's veto when it comes before them for a vote. That is it.
Point of order? I don't know. I think that's moot now, because I think they voted on it today.
They didn't.
Yes, they did.
I talked to Representative,
I
I talked
think-
to
I-
State
I read an
Representative
article, I
Brenda-
thought they
I talked
voted
to
on it.
Representative, State Representative Brenda Kupchak before arriving to this meeting, and they had some procedural things, but it still has the ability to come for a override vote, And there's still time to do that, and if it comes before them, that's why I'm making the resolution.
Yeah, I heard
Second.
something different than John, but a little bit similar, that the
Well, can I hang on
Oh,
just
yeah,
a second? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go
No,
ahead.
I want to hear this. Do we have a second for this? Because we're, okay, Mrs. Leclerc, second. I just wanted to make sure we had it out there. Go ahead.
And I don't, that the Republicans, with the support of a couple of the moderate Democrats, pulled a parliamentary procedure whereby they avoided voting on it.
We
And
voted
so it
voting on
says-
it today, this is what Ms. Kupchak said,
And
but
then,
there's
so it
still...
could- that's what I was going to say. So it could
today.
either not be voted on,
Yes.
or it could be voted on.
But there is still proper time for it to be brought, and she thought that it would be brought within the next several weeks, she said, within the time period.
Yeah.
So, so,
I agree. There was a lot of procedural shenanigans up in Hartford.
oh, there was claims...
Yeah, it's a fair point.
They were bringing the state constitution involved today and things like that, and their type of rules, and I forget, they're not called the Roberts Rules, they're called something else. But there was a lot of things going on. I wanted to be clear before I came here this evening, so I wanted to check with her on what the latest was, and she spoke to me, I called her around 7:15.
So did you,
For the latest.
so did you read your entire
Yes, I
sentence
did.
about it? Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? We're just voting to put it on the agenda. Yeah. We're just putting it on the agenda, that's all. So, okay, all in favor of putting this on the agenda? Those opposed? 2 opposed, abstentions. Fine, it's on the agenda. Okay. Let's talk about the motion. Does anybody have any comments on the motion? Mrs. Marmion, please.
My comment is, the governor vetoed the budget. I think now we have an opportunity to come together, both parties, hopefully have bipartisan discussions about the positive and negative elements of both of the budgets, and hopefully retain what's best, hopefully have a dialogue and a conversation, and frankly, compromise, because we're going to need to compromise. Neither side is going to get everything that they want. And I think it would benefit the state and Fairfield if they had that dialogue. So I am very hopeful, actually, that what can come out of all of this is dialogue and discussion, and hopefully what's best for not only Fairfield but the state. So I am going to oppose this motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Marmion. Mr. Vitola?
Yeah, just briefly, I agree with Mrs. Merriman. You know, the funny thing is, neither budget that was up there addressed the $6 billion problem. Neither one. And, you know,
The
pension, the
The
$6
pension,
billion
yeah.
dollar, I guess we're at the 10-year problem that we're already 2 years in, right? And we all agree that we don't want the teacher's pension, we don't want municipalities to have to pay for that. I mean, it's my hope, and maybe I'm pie in the sky, that there would be a budget that addresses this issue, compromise on both sides, because I'm with all of you when it comes to this. I'm disgusted with what's been going on up there, and we all are. So, you know, I appreciate what you're doing here, but I just can't support it.
Thank you, Mr. Vitola. Anybody else have a comment on this? Mr. DeWitt?
My only comment is, a couple comments. First off, hope is not a strategy, right? But the second thing is, I see these numbers as they were presented by our CFO as bookends. We've got this $905,000, advantage to our town, all the way down to $6 million, but I'll just frame it to the Democrat.
$6 million negative.
$6 million negative, right? Just in basic negotiations, there's no way that number goes up from 905. So it would appear to me, at least being the simple person that I am, that we're not going to get any better than that number, so that the veto of the veto, or the override of the veto, seems to be the best financial position for our town as it exists today. I agree with both of you. It's probably not perfect. I mean, a few things I've read, there's not perfect on either side, but I don't see it getting any better, so I don't think there's any downside to asking our state reps to do what Mr. Walsh is asking.
The way I'm looking at this, and full disclosure, one of the reductions in the budget that was vetoed was to the Connecticut Green Bank, and I serve on the board of directors of that, and it's upwards of a $20 million reduction. And when I put on my hat representing the Green Bank, and I understand all the hard work that has gone into that initiative, and actually the fact that it's one of the only things that we actually lead the nation in, is the Green Bank. And other states actually come to us for tutorials on how to set up, and sadly they try to poach our staff. And they're being reduced. So when I hear about, hey, you know, there's tough choices here and things in this budget and in all budgets that are ugly, I agree. But as I sit here as the chairman of the Board of Finance of the town of Fairfield, a town that gives $260 million a year plus to the state. A town where if some of the other budgets are adopted, we're going to be making significant reductions, most likely, to services. We've asked repeatedly that the Board of Education look at fundamental structural change to their operations. I'm advocating for the town right now because I don't want to have to do that come March. And I'm concerned that that's exactly what's going to happen. And I believe my fiduciary responsibility is to set aside some of the things that I don't agree with and advocate for the taxpayers and the citizens of Fairfield. And I'm not saying that somebody else is not. I'm just saying that I feel that I need to advocate to put us in the strongest financial position, given what this town already gives to the state. We are by far net givers, not net takers. And enough is enough. And that's why I would support this motion. And I will gladly reach out to our state delegation and tell them that I think they should support the override on behalf of this board if that's what they want me to do. Anybody else?
I just want to say I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said here already, and I understand your perspectives on it as well, and that maybe there will be a budget that comes along. As we sit here today and seeing some of these other budgets, or even no budget at all, and just executive order losing $6 million plus, I think we have a fiduciary duty, and that's my own personal view, on the taxpayers of Fairfield as the Board of Finance to bring the funding in that we budgeted, and to support that, especially since it's been passed by the legislature. The governor said he was going to veto it. He didn't hold back on vetoing it. I do have some problems with, you know, I will say that I don't have a problem with some people have called it gimmicks in the budget in regards to some of the pension numbers, because I think this state's going to have to wake up to the reality, just like this town had to wake up to the reality that pensions are changing. Okay? 10 years ago, if you would have told me that we were going to be on make our employees go on 401As and that we were going to go from defined benefit to defined contribution, that idea might have seemed crazy. But because of the realities of the world, the recessions and things like that, and where this is going, the state, because the governor signed that letter with the unions, he has tied our hands for 10 years on that. And you know what? At least under the budget that's been passed by the legislature, it gives them 10 years to work that out and maybe start with new hires, kind of like what we did. I'm not saying switch everybody over right away, but come to some realization that the entire funding of pensions is changing, and that it's not just going to be you work for the state for 20 years or 10 years, you get a full pension. So I think that message needs to be sent to the statewide. I hope our legislators support this to show that they do not support what the governor wants to do and some of the other budgets are out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I believe I'm fulfilling my fiduciary duty because this budget, neither budget addresses the issue that has gotten us in this mess to begin with. And that's the problem. And, you know, maybe it's pie in the sky, but my hope was, and still is, that they're going to try at least start to address the issue with this budget. And maybe they won't, and I understand that. But so I think we all believe we're fulfilling our fiduciary duties. We just have different ways of fulfilling those duties.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mr. Becker, and then I'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Yeah, and I'm going to support this, and I understand Mr. Mottola's point. I guess my concern is what the difference is between the two budgets, really the original before the amendment was placed. Largely transferred our money to failed entities. And I don't mean the Green Bank, who's doing a great job. I mean failed municipalities. I mean failed, quite frankly, the structure of the college system. I think that it's appalling, their response, UConn specifically back. And I worry that any sort of compromise is just going to really not ultimately end up fixing that, but just take our money and throw it to fix those problems. And we've worked so hard in this town to be where we are, but we're getting to a point where it's harder and harder to keep putting off the true pain, and any more hits are just, it's just in the interest of the town. I have to support this.
Mr. DeWitt?
Based on a comment from the chairman, I think it's appropriate. I would like to make a motion to add to the end of the sensitive body, and we request that the chairman of the Board of Finance convey this message to the state delegation.
Do we have a second to that? Mr.
It's my motion, I'll second it.
Walsh? Any other questions, comments on that amendment to add to the end that the chairman of the Board of Finance has requested to convey this to the state delegation on behalf of the board? All in favor of just that amendment?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, everybody's in favor of the amendment. Now I'll call the entire statement as amended for a vote. All in favor of the entire sense of the body motion? Those opposed? That item carries. Thank you very much. Is there any other communication? I don't know of any.
I know of none, sir.
All right. Before we go, we have the election that takes place, I guess, before our next meeting, right? So I just want to wish everybody good luck in the election. I wish you well. Thank you. Thank you. And regardless of the outcome of the election, we'll see at the next meeting, because nobody gets sworn in until December 1. So it could be an interesting agenda, November 14th. We do. We do. We have one more meeting, because I believe that the swearing in takes place December 1st. I believe that's the way it goes. I at least hope that's the way it goes. If not, goodbye.
Well, I was going to thank you guys all. I was going to thank you all for your service, but I guess we'll wait till the next meeting.
Okay, so all in favor, well, I'm going to take a motion for adjournment. Mr. DeWitt, second, Mr. Mottola, in the efforts of bipartisanship. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed, abstentions? Good night, everybody.